Hello, lovely. So, I want to talk to you today about the importance of transition and easing yourself back into your normal daily life. When you go to these retreats, especially like the energy healing retreats, the spiritual retreats, things of that nature, the importance that when you return, not to just jump right back into life as usual. And what I see people do sometimes, and I actually, the very first one I did the same mistake. I was like, great, the retreat is over. I'll come back to work that Monday. I think the retreat ended on a Saturday, so I'd get back on Sunday. And just went right back into work life. And at the time I was working a very corporate job, and don't do that. Highly do not recommend. Absolutely don't do that to yourself if you can avoid it. Don't traumatize yourself like that, right? And part of what happens is you're going to these retreat spaces, and a lot of the practices are meant to kind of crack you wide open, right? It's a lot of opening up. It's a lot of being unguarded. It's a lot of going really deep and not playing at this surface or superficial level. And that's great and absolutely necessary for to be able to do the healing, to get the transformation that you're looking for. All of that should happen. Great. However, what's also happening is that space, at least if you have a responsible host and facilitators, right, that those spaces are being very tightly held and being cultivated and cared for and held to support the particular dynamic and energy that they're trying to facilitate and the transformation that's happening, right? So they're setting and they're kind of keeping watch over you guys as your attendees in this space. So they're helping create this really safe, really tight container. They're watching, and I use the term watching, not yes, in the literal sense they're watching as well, but very all senses are very highly open and highly attuned and checking for anything that may not be serving, for anything that may be a danger to what's to the transformation, to the healing that's trying to be facilitated, that may not be desired, right? So it can be dealt with. It can be if it is something that's coming in, right? But it's also being held in the way of nothing should be coming in the first place. But they're still going to keep that watchful perception open to monitor and to make sure. And they're trained to handle that, or at least they have enough experience to know how to handle it, right? And I think training comes in multiple of ways. So I'm not necessarily talking hey, they're formally trained. They may be, it may be what a lot of Western society would consider less formal, and an apprenticeship. And it may just be that spirit has trained them, right? All your facilitators, before you let someone facilitate holding space for you, check them, make sure you vibe with them, make sure ask about their training, ask about the experience, right? And make sure it's right for you before you even put yourself in these places. But once you're in these spaces, hopefully you found a good facilitator. And so if you have, they're in they're kind of in this protective mode, right? So they're making sure that space is secure. They're making sure that things are okay. They're making sure that what could pose a danger has been removed or hasn't been allowed in that space. And then you come out of this bubble, right? Which that's fine. That's great. But you're ooh, you have this transformation. It feels amazing. You have all these things that are still kind of coming through. Hopefully your facilitator has closed things up so you're not as wide open, and has helped you kind of modulate and kind of come back to some form of balance and kind of, I don't want to say normalcy because that's not correct, but they've kind of helped you not be so wide open and receiving everything, right? Because that's an important part of facilitation and of closing the circle and things like that. Even so, there's still normally a healing process. There's still normally an adjustment period that you're going to go through afterward, right? Things are still like being released. Things are still being transformed. Things are in shift. And what's happening when you decide like, hey, I'm just going to go like right back to work like the next day or whatever, you're going from an environment that has been carefully constructed, at the physical level, at the energetic level, at as many levels as they're trying to work with you on. It's been cultivated to nourish and protect and really support you, right? And just be this really wonderful space where you can be that open. Whereas your normal day-to-day typically is not, and especially this is true if you are newer on your healing journey and you don't come from that background. You're not usually working with the energetics at this level. You're not, a lot of times when we're new, we're still trying to figure out how to even modulate energy. And especially if you're someone that considers yourself an empath, a lot of people discover that they're an empath because they're in that disempowered state, which is I absorb everyone's emotions. That's not truly what an empath does. That is what happens when we're in what I call the disempowered empath state, which is basically the gift is activated, but we don't know how to work with that muscle, right? We don't know how to modulate it. We don't know how to be more open or be more protected, or to exist in a state where we can perceive without being taken over by what we're perceiving. And so when we just jump back in, we're going from this very like soft, cuddly, nurturing space that's meant to like protect us and keep us nice and cozy and, let all the things happen that need to happen. But it's a very highly monitored environment, and people ready to respond if anything shifts or if you were put in a state that isn't ideal and isn't conducive and actually may be more detrimental to you, right? They're ready to respond to that and help you through that. Whereas when you go back, right, the world is still the world. And if your environment before going to this retreat was not one where it was like, hey, there are a lot of the energetics to support you, you're not feeling drained, everything's kind of nourishing you already, you're stepping out of this really nourishing, nutritive, fertile environment that's carefully cultivated and protected and safeguarded, and you're going into something that is more harsh and isn't set up and so focused on nurturing you necessarily, and you have to fend for yourself and take care of yourself, right? And it's important to give yourself time, like to give a little bit of a buffer for your body and your energy and everything to kind of catch up and switch back into being in that environment, right? It's kind of like if you've done any going to spas and like they do like the hot and cold treatment, right? And part of that is meant to shock the body and help keep things moving, right? But if you've gone from like a really warm environment to like a really cold environment, like it kind of takes a minute. It's not the most comfortable thing in the world. And it's just, if you can give yourself time to adjust, right? Like if you go from like a warm environment to kind of a neutral environment or a cool environment to a cold environment, it's less abrupt, it's less painful. Like you're less like, what the fuck is going on, right? We have that same kind of freak out on an energetic level when we go from, hey, here's this really nice, soft, protected, nurturing container that's feeding me and meant for me to thrive and meant for me to expand my gifts and be very open to receive and to release, to an environment that was not constructed that way. And that's fine. Like, you can still bring your changes, your transformation, your healing, a different level of openness when you return. It's just not going to be the same as when you're in that environment. And sometimes if we do it too quickly and we haven't already kind of learned how to hold ourselves well in the new energy, you end up, it'll look a lot like sick, right? Like, some people get really sick. Some people, it's just like overwhelming to step back into. And then they think something's wrong, right? And what's really happened is really you just kind of switched environments a little too quickly and you're trying to catch up to yourself. So if you can, whenever you're going to the retreats, especially places where you're going to be really, really wide open and receptive or really purging things, give yourself some time to come back into a homeostasis with like being outside of that container, right? So like being home before you then go and jump into like engaging with the world, and it'll really help. So I just wanted to share that because it's been on my heart, and I've been seeing a lot of like information for upcoming retreats, and people have been really excited, but they've also been like a lot of like spiritual healing and like learn your gifts and all these things, which I think are fabulous. And also I think, we should let people know how to kind of support themselves in coming back from those spaces, because when you switch back too fast, it can be harder than it needs to be. And also, whenever you're coming back from those types of spaces, really take the time to tend to yourself before just jumping into being around a whole bunch of other people who like didn't have that same experience, who don't know what you were going through, who don't like, who may not understand the principles and concepts and things like that. Is going to be really crucial. So sometimes you may come out of it and you may be really, really exhausted. That's okay. Like, especially if it's something where there's like a lot of releasing and purging. But just giving yourself time to rest, time to hydrate, time to make sure you're getting like the food and the nutrients and things like that you need, which sometimes can be a bit harder in like a day-to-day that is more hectic and on the go, and not as beneficial and supportive to us as a whole. So I just wanted to share that. Hopefully, if you guys are going to retreat, you have a wonderful retreat and you're able to give yourself that space to come back and integrate a little bit first and figure out how to be in this new energetic outside of that really protected container. All right, that's all I got for you today. Talk to you guys soon. Have a wonderful evening.